everybody to Burbs Bros. We're going to be doing things a little differently. We are just talking UAPs this episode. Because Sean has fucking hook, line, and sinkered me. I've always been interested in it, but Sean sent one interview, and then it opened up to this interview, which we'll be talking about. And since then, that's all I've been talking about with my friends, my wife, my work colleagues. That's all I care about. And I'm not even. Look, I'm not even speaking this hyperbolically. I think it's the most important thing.
I don't know if this has ever been done on a podcast before.
Oh, what is Pat just setting up our ambiance?
Between two ferns, 4 minutes in.
So I think basically this guy Jake Barber, which we'll talk about there, is a airline mechanic, I guess, fighter pilot mechanic. That's what he's classified as in the military. He's clearly doing more than that.
His cover identity was just a straight up helicopter mechanic. But what was really going on is that he was brought into this crash retrieval program that people have been talking about in the news for the past however many years. And as far as mainstream, it's been very, very new. But he is the newest, biggest whistleblower on the episode with Ryan Sprague. You might have heard we talked about him a bit. It was the newest thing that we were talking about at the end of the episode. And basically, this is a guy who basically has all the credentials you could ask for.
Absolutely. And I think we should say, even before we just if you haven't listened or seen the interview, stop our podcast, watch the interview, and then come back and listen to our podcast.
Yes,
because it's probably the most incredible. It is the most incredible interview I've ever heard in my life. I think
it is.
I think it's got to be the most.
If you take 40% of what this guy is saying is true, it is the biggest news story in the history of humankind
of civilization. Now let's preface that, because we were actually talking about this on the way here. Like, I don't think we need to debate anymore whether or not these guys are like legit. Like, it's almost like, as I was comparing it to, like, it's like talking to us about geography and be like, well, the world could be flat. Like we know it's a sphere. We know that these guys. I think there's no way, with the amount of corroboration these guys have had independently from each other. Because if you watch enough of these, because now I'm like fully in, like Sean, I've seen like 20 of these fucking interviews, and there's like a couple things which I'll mention to Sean. Actually, I want to hear like his opinion on whether or not doubting the veracity of these guys, but. There's a couple things that keep repeating themselves constantly, and when there's that much corroboration around guys that are not fucking me, all right? They're not kooks. They don't have big fucking, they're not like Marty McFly. I mean, who's the Doc from fucking Back to the Future? Doc Brown. These guys are like career professionals,
and they're not even like Ancient Aliens guys. The guys with the wacky hair that comes on there. The guy, and even who's mentioned is the guy named Stephen Greer, Dr. Stephen Greer, who was a surgeon of sorts for the past 30 years, has been involved in this UFO world, and the idea of his validity has been debated over the years in that world, because he comes out as an opportunist. He has an app that you can download for $10, and he teaches you how to summon these crafts. By the way,
of course, there's going to be people like this.
Yes, of course. There's always charlatans. There's always to anything, with anything. There's comedy, anything, right? But just to do a quick recap, Jake Barber could not have more credentials. So I love the idea that you're saying we're past the point of not believing these guys, right? And what his story is that he was in this elite program that was undercover. We want to call it top secret.
Yeah.
His cover story was that he was a helicopter mechanic because he was in charge of security and retrieval of these craft. This guy has multiple incursions where this happened, and in one such incursion, he was using the helicopter. It was tethered to. He was 150 feet away from this thing. It was an egg-shaped object, which has come up in folklore.
Here's my question. I had a question for you. Is the egg? Is that the same thing as the Tic Tac?
No, I think because in the interview, if you notice, Ross Carthart, they bring up the egg.
Okay, wait, just a background, guys. But Tic Tac, we're talking about the 2017 New York video that was released in the New York Times, and that still has not been explained.
Eyewitness testimony of David Fravor, who was same kind of thing, credentials up the ass, and he was anecdotally telling the world that he saw a 40-foot Tic Tac shaped craft. This seems to be same kind of porcelain white, not a spot on it, no markings, no exhaust, no heat signature coming off this thing, because it was at night they first saw it. But it seems to be an egg shape, which, like I mentioned a couple episodes ago, was brought up in New Mexico with Ronnie Zamora, whatever his name is. Anyway.
Yeah. So I basically, so you can just skip this. Like if you don't believe what we're saying, again, stop the podcast. Go on these News Nation reviews or all these other interviews. Listen to a couple for yourselves because I don't want to waste time. Like I think really what this podcast should be about is what are they? What does it mean for us? What does this mean for humanity? What does it mean for religion? I think we have to operate on the basis that this is real.
Yes, I am at the point where I am operating on the basis that this is completely real. And I think it all comes from the same phenomenon. So all of these, so when you hear about craft or you hear about all these legends or if you're talking about the Bible and you hear about certain things like that, it's all the same. They call it NHI. It's non-human intelligence because we can't explain. It's not us and we can't explain what it is. And even if you're seeing physical objects of this stuff, I think it's manifestations of this so-called NHI.
Yeah.
And there's so many themes that similarly run through this.
Well, let me hop onto that. When Sean's talking about NHI and he's talking about these vessels, one of the things that's really shocking and fascinating is that there are reports that the biological material, the beings they're either finding or the eggs, those are automation, those are robots, but the ship itself is alive.
Right.
Which is fucking mind-blowing. I mean, it's so fucking...
So what Dan's talking about is that basically that the things that you've heard of is like aliens from Close Encounters of the Third Kind are basically biological
dummies. They're basically dummies.
That are in this craft, but what really powers the craft is whatever this joint consciousness is.
It's like if you've seen the movie Her, when they have...
It's a great movie.
It's a great movie. When he wants to hook up with his AI, he has like a woman. He supplants the AI into a prostitute's body or something, and then hooks up. I think that would be similar to what they're saying.
This is exactly what you're saying. So anyway, but real quick, so as far as this Jake Barber interview goes, he goes into extreme detail. This is the 3-hour version that you're going to check out on News Nation. And one of the things he said when they were sent to go recover this egg craft, he got the closest to it, 150 feet away, which is super, super close. And something came over his body. He had some sort of quote unquote, it was like religious. He didn't even say religious.
It was a spiritual
experience where he encountered and he felt an overwhelming sense of sadness and happiness at the same time. And love. And he said it felt like his mother. It was basically and this is a guy, this is military. He said it changed his life. It said it's made him
He cannot talk about that part of the story without crying. Mm-hmm. Like he can talk about everything else and he's very, but as soon as he mentions this particular, whatever psychic connection he had with this craft, he loses it. And I believe him.
Yeah.
I 100% believe it.
I 1,000% believe this guy. I think there's too many details that are left on the floor here. I think that and it happens with a lot of these guys. You have Grush. Lou Elizondo has a book called Imminent, which it describes all this stuff. There's too many names, dates, and places, like I've said before.
It's too much.
For serious people, for this not to be true. Not everybody's being played at this.
And I think I have a pretty bleak opinion of humanity. A lot of these guys could be making a lot more money doing other things.
Absolutely.
That wasn't the case 20 years ago. The people who spoke on this was their game. These guys, you talk to Jake Barber and you're like, this guy's, they already said before it, he's independently wealthy. They say that?
Yeah.
So like this guy there's no reason this guy, I always look for motive and there's no real motive other than his motive is, it just very much seems like a missionary. The way he's talking about it is very much, like a missionary, like you would have the Church of Latter-day Saints, somebody like that's what it feels more like. He's like, hey, this is a real thing.
Yeah.
And it's benevolent and we have a right to know about this.
But coming from a place basically preaching to secular people, but not in a way where you're like, I've been washed by the Lord. It's a thing where like, holy cow, I was encountering something in a completely secular, completely military-based thing, and I had an emotional response to this object.
He was talking about, basically flying this incredibly expensive aircraft and being terrified that, he was getting this emotional while doing it.
Yeah. He said he was like, I might have. So how do you, after it's done and you have this emotional experience, how do you tell the rest of your crew who are very serious people, I almost dropped the load based off this overwhelming emotion I was having?
Yes.
Which, right there you go. To me, I'm like, what military guy do you know that's going to admit that and then be like, yeah, I gotcha.
Dude, yeah. I mean, we see it all the time, dude. If you see these military guys on Rogan or other podcasts and all those Navy SEAL guys, they're all talking about, like, the guys that are military guys, like the Tim Dale, what's his name? The guy, Tim Dale, I don't know.
The Ryan, whatever his name is.
Somebody else, but they're talking about, like, you could tell they're like fucking, we're alpha, you know? Like, this is not how this guy is describing this.
Not at all. He says it's changed him as a person. It's made him more sensitive, made us more aware, more self-aware, whatever you want to call it. So this was like basically a religious experience for this guy without being religious. And this guy's religious. And it would have been this guy grew up in the church. His grandparents, who he has a lot of affection for, these two grandfathers, started the church in his small town, in California somewhere. But he's still talking about this in the parameters of, this is just what happened. I'm not saying it's by any God or any religion.
There's no way this shit, because I don't think that, a guy like that does not operate on fiction. But some other things about it that, okay, so what Sean and I are describing, so he approached this egg-shaped thing. He had a psychic. Now, it only touched him on the crew, which I think that was interesting, which makes me think, where my head went is like, okay, well, then maybe this isn't a consciousness. These are actual things, because they picked one thing rather than, if it was just consciousness, wouldn't it be I don't know how it works, but it felt like, to me, I don't know how the fuck these things are. I do know that, I was religious. I wasn't religious, and this has made me very hopeful. My reaction is the opposite of, I think, what they think everyone's going to, and that's what he says too. He said most people are going to have positive reactions to this, and I think he's right.
I think he's right. And on top of it, just to give you even more background as far as the object itself goes, and hey, how do they even, because one of the things that Coulthard presses him on, he goes, how did you know this one? Because he would go to this place called the Field. The Field was where a lot of these testing would be done on this military technology, right?
And it's psionic testing. So explain.
Well, that's different. That's different. This is just straight up testing of these craft. But he said 9 times out of 10, you're running into already existing military craft.
Yeah. And some of the shit's crazy that he describes. He describes like a plane that comes out of the fucking mountains.
Right. Exactly.
So it's like whatever that is, it's insane.
Which could be the answer to a lot of other UFO sites. People like that. I don't know what that was. Right. So he's like. So the reason why I believe him so much is he's saying, I've seen so much of this craft that I know exists experimentally that when we retrieved this craft, the security measures were different, the reaction by the crew was different, the reaction by our superiors were different. That's why I know this wasn't in the class of, hey guys, it's just an experimental plane that went down. It has plasma in it. It's anti-gravity. It's this. That's how he goes, I know. And also from seeing it in person, he goes, I knew it was different than the rest of everything we've seen. And then based off the aftermath, where the higher ups were like clearances and security afterwards, they reacted way different to that egg than they did probably 100 other things these guys retrieved. So that to me also spoke to this seems legitimate to me.
Absolutely.
If what he's saying is true, which I 1,000% believe. Psionics is a whole different category, which actually fits into the other thing I wanted to talk to you about. But before I do, I want to take a little side note here, because you're saying we should talk about. We believe that it's true. What do you think? Like if you had to put it into a elevator pitch.
Well, I don't know. That's hard because
pitch,
I think like I had an answer for that, but then I kind of like the reason that I brought up it only communicating with him is that then that kind of like it kind of contradicts my reasoning. So I don't know. I really don't know. I think I have no idea. I think what I want it to be. Like when he was talking about his mother, I'm sure that there's a part of you too that wants it to be an afterlife, and
yes,
and humans. We want to know that we can see your dad and my mom and things like that. And so I was getting very emotional about that when I talked about it, especially with my therapist. So that's what I want.
Right.
But I can by no means say that that's what it is. I don't think it, I would wager to say it is most likely, from everything I've heard, an interdimensional being or consciousness, life form that's communicating with us. That's what it feels like. So
what I actually think, based off this, and the next thing I want to talk to you about is that what this whole thing is consciousness based. And one of the things that led me to that is separate than what we're talking about today is there's another podcast I listened to, and it's eyewitness testimony, so take it with a grain of salt. But this guy called up and talked about him and his girlfriend. I might have already mentioned this in the show, but if I did, I apologize. They were in their living room one night at their house, and then a giant bright light shines into their living room. They go, "What the hell is that?" They thought it was like a helicopter, plane, whatever it was.
Yeah.
They open up the window and they both see an object, like 100 feet in the air above, 200 feet in the air above their house, and the guy sees a cigar-shaped object with yellow and purple lights. The woman sees a traditional disc with red and blue lights.
Interesting.
And they're looking at the same exact thing.
So you think?
I think it's consciousness based, and I think however this thing is going out, I think it's radio station based. So I think the people who are able to have that afterlife and go onto this thing are the ones who are able to tap into whatever this consciousness is in the world.
Yeah.
Because they talk about, so this other thing that I wanted to bring up is the thing called the telepathy tapes, which is hugely popular right now. And basically it's got to be related to what this Jake Barber thing is, but it doesn't mention UAPs. It's these studies. Let's play the Can you put your headphones on? I want you to hear the trailer for this thing, just to give you a background before.
This is Kai Dickens is the host.
Kai Dickens.
The podcast.
Podcast, yeah, and it's like one of the #1 podcasts in the past like a month or two. So play it for Danny Boy. I already listened to a lot of episodes.
I'll check it out for sure.
In here thoughts. And I said, bullshit. Telepathy is the tip of the iceberg with their spiritual gifts.
People don't understand that they can do this. They don't even have to be in the same room, the same zip code.
Welcome to the Telepathy Tapes, where we venture into claims of widespread telepathy via a group who is systematically dismissed, non-speakers who often have autism.
Joining us today to shed some light, Dr. Diane Powell.
I'm working with children who have been reported by a parent to be able to read their mind.
The data was so compelling and accurate that I had to follow it, even though I knew I was risking my scientific reputation.
For decades, a very specific group of people have been claiming telepathy is happening in their homes and in their classrooms. And nobody has believed them, nobody has listened to them, but on this podcast, we do.
Well, I completely am on board with telepathy and remote viewing, and I wasn't before this year.
Yeah. So which basically this show is about is how it starts off is the Dr. Diane whatever did chock full amount of studying on the topic of and working with these kids that were non-speaking autistic children or children with autism.
That's my question: is how was she able to determine that? You know,
because what they were doing is they were able to communicate in other ways they had boards or they have apps on their thing where they're spelling out the words.
Crazy.
So some of them had boards where they're pointing and they're hitting things and the sounds show up, and then some of them have things where they type in and it
well, I'm definitely going to listen to some of those from now on.
But one of the things she talks about in it that these kids are able to connect with each other. Like there's multiple hundreds to thousands of stories of these kids talking to each other telepathically, but also able to meet when they're in different zip codes, able to meet up on a thing. It's basically a shared consciousness called the Hill, and they're like at the Hill. You're able to meet up with other consciousnesses that are from. They apparently.
Which some people would say this would be heaven.
Yes. So I think that and the thing we're talking about is completely intertwined.
I agree because and. Which as I'm hearing more about this, I'm vaping more. But what Jake Barber says, and we'll talk about the psionic programs, is that they're bringing this alien craft in. They're having people who are prone to telepathy or have telepathic gifts. A lot of people from the indigenous community, a lot of gay men and children.
Which there you go. Isn't that such a weird left? Freaking out of nowhere
thing. I think that's what he's scared of. He's like, well, they're doing that, and then he refers to the this benevolent consciousness as a they, which I'm sure that's going to strike a lot of like I'm sure that's and using it in the same way that trans people use it.
The transgendered consciousness.
I don't know, but I mean it's true. I mean, like obviously if it was, you would think it's not going to have fucking sexual organs that we know.
No, it's just a feeling. It's
the whole thing is about population, so it's like they can populate. I don't know how they fucking populate, but that's not how they do it.
I thought what it meant when he says they, meaning just it as one thing, not as where it's not a being. It's not beings that can be born or die or whatever it is. It's just this shared consciousness that you go in and out of. Like when they talk about 6th sense, and then like, what about 6th, 7th, and 8th and 9th sense? And what they realize, that's why they talk to Native people. It's been part of their culture for however many years, because they're so in tune with the planet and have all the trappings of modern life have not not muddled up whatever their consciousness
Which
is.
does make me think about my life differently because, you know, I use too much THC products. I eat fast food. And I always wonder, like, you know, I mean, I know why I do the THC thing. It's because I don't want to drink and I want to, or my anxiety does have some benefits. But I do think that doing all that stuff dulls your psychic. Like, I don't know if I could ever, like, I've never experienced or seen anything supernatural. No. And I think that there's a reason for that. I think there's maybe a biological reason for that. That, like, it's harder for, like, a straight guy to do that, a straight white dude, maybe.
Well, no, I also think that, I think it's location. I think, like you said, but based off what the Jake Barber interview was saying, he was saying it's based off diet. But I think what also can happen, I think it's the thing that can be learned. So these things, people can learn. That's why people do hallucinogenics, like the mushroom thing, or when people do, what is it? What's it called? With the where they see the ayahuasca, and the other one, where it's
ketamine,
like, I think it's giving you a little
DMT.
bit of, a DMT. Where it's giving you a little piece of this. It's like a cheat code, like in Mario, where it's giving you a little. Hey, here's a little wave of this world, and we're giving you a little bit of a window.
You know what I will say? I don't think anyone named Mario is in that program. I don't think anyone named Mario is a psychic. I'll go on. And by the way, this is how into it. This is the first joke we've made this entire podcast. That's how into this we are. We haven't made one fucking joke. And I'm wearing a fucking hoodie with an otter sipping green tea on it.
With a kimono on.
I actually enjoy it.
It's the grand consciousness.
This is my spirit animal.
It's just Super Mario. You get to the center.
Just Italians yelling at women walking down the street. Oh, he's so good.
The meaning of life is nice tits.
Yeah. This fucking higher consciousness won't stop trying to fuck my wife.
Your Honor, my wife cheated on me with the universe. Well, like a lot of guys. No, I mean like the heart of the universe.
Well, I mean, and it's very hopeful because it makes me think that, you know, when I die, this isn't it. You know, it's not just going to be.
But the thing I get worried about, because
black.
I have my negativity factor. Another running theme with this Jake Barber thing is like there's positive vibes that have to be involved where in order to be privy to this stuff. Like if the negativity is coming off you in any way, or if you're thinking this in a detrimental way, it will not show itself to you. You will not be on the same frequency.
But my thing is, like, you and I never think about this negatively. We think about everything else in life negatively, and that's something, you know, that's for a different podcast. But we don't think about this. So I would wonder if I had a follow-up question, Jake Barber. If you by happenstance listen to this podcast, we'd love to have you on. I would love to know, you know, what the fuck was I just saying?
But, well, as far as if after you die, it's like it's good to know it's an afterlife. But is it a guaranteed afterlife, or is it a thing where you have to get yourself to a point where you're on this radio station where you're like, holy shit, I'm on the hill, I'm in the consciousness. Yeah. I get to see Kobe. I don't know. You know what I mean? Like, that's the thing I'm worried about. I'm like, am I going to miss out on this because of all of my doubting I'm doubting Jake Barber's military statistics? You know what I'm saying?
Well, you're not doubting that part.
No,
I mean, I would be. This is what I was trying to say, is that I would want to ask him, hey, like, if I believe in this stuff, but I'm a negative person, would it work? And I don't know if it would.
Well, that's what I'm wondering. That's why I think
that's really what it is. Look, you and I really haven't been bumping on this stuff. Like, it's just everything else in fucking life.
Yes.
But to be in our fucking defense, open a goddamn newspaper and read one fucking of the 5 stories that you're gonna. Like, there's nothing positive right now. So it is very. My life is. I have a wonderful wife and friends and great dogs, but you know, it is hard to be positive about the world right now.
It is, but then I think if you get led into something. Like, look, that thing was shown to Jake Barber, right? And he's saying it in a way that it's not just like, hey, I was washed in the waters of Jesus Christ. It's not with this legend type scenario. He's like, this thing happened to me on a military craft, and I had an experience. So it's like, if that thing was to show itself to you, which I think happens with a lot of hallucinogenics to people and whatever else, you immediately would be like, hey, like the couple times I did mushrooms, I remember. It did change me a little bit. It was incremental.
It totally changed me. Alcohol, you know, has done nothing but made things worse.
Yeah, same here.
For my life, for the most part. But mushrooms, which I abused, but like it does, it connects you to the Spinozan idea of a God, that we're all connected, which is what this stuff is describing, which would be amazing if that's true, and I hope it is true.
I believe that it's true. Just a matter of the idea of being let in on this. It's almost like a VIP area of consciousness where I'm like, how am I going to get into this new club? Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, it's like, what do you have to do? And it's not like a thing.
I don't think you can't treat this like comedy. That's first off, you're treating this like The Cellar, like you get past in consciousness. I don't think that if that's how it is, I don't believe in it. I don't want to believe in it.
You need 2 Recs for the consciousness.
I do think. Look, there's certain things that I do. I don't think I should be eating meat. I should be working out more. I could certainly be more patient and kinder with people. Those are things that I think would all help. But as far as like, I have to, look, meditation helps me, but it has nothing to do. And to give you an idea, I've been using a hypnotist the last couple of weeks to get rid of my fear of flying, because I have to fly every week for my job, and and I've been doing stand-up forever. I don't know. It's really the worst fear to have with everything I've decided to do with my life. But I've been, and there's things about that are interesting. Like, but it's not how you would think. Like, it's like the hypnotist. Like, I thought I was out for 20 minutes. It was 35. It's not like, it's not as crazy as you think. It's so, but that makes me more hopeful too.
But you're missing time. But there is missing time.
There is missing time.
Yeah.
So what I'm trying to say is like I just think that like almost everything we know about this is probably. I mean, I just think it's going to be. Here's another theory I had. What if Trump being elected is like, like he's going to nosedive the country and economy so bad that we're going to get to the point where the general population will be like, okay, we're ready for aliens. Please, anything else but the fucking reality that I'm in right now. I think that's a possibility, like especially, depending on how this tariff thing works out.
Everything's going to be burnt to the ground anyway. So what's the difference?
That's what I mean. So if it's burnt to the ground, you're more.
Everything's LA.
Yeah. I mean, like, and maybe we should talk about our own prejudices. Like, I will say that our interest in this increases with our hopes and dreams in other places lowering. So that to me is something to think about.
You
at
mean
least
career stuff?
If you want it, not just. I mean, I think just like when you career stuff, but when you get 40 in general, like for instance, I'm not even talking about career. I saw like a guy like I work in I write for WWE. I work in professional wrestling, and I'll see these guys who are like ah, man, I want to get myself in shape like that, and then I go, I'm never gonna get. What are you talking? I'm 40 years old. This guy's 27. He was in the fucking NFL. Like, what are you talking about?
It's not happening.
But aliens though. So that's my point. So if you want to know our prejudices, that I think that's before believing us, you should probably take in that too.
Yes, absolutely. But I do think that. So that's a good question. You're 15 years ago. You're this same information comes up that this whatever you want to call it, the slow disclosure comes out. The New York Times article happens in 2009. I don't see myself not having the same. It might be a little bit different, but I'm not ignoring it.
I don't know if I would care as much just because like at 25, all I was about was like comedy and getting laid. That was it. But like, it definitely, it would, I don't know, maybe it would. I mean, this is so fucking crazy. This stuff is unlike anything, we've ever talked about, and apparently on some of these spacecrafts, there's reportings of hieroglyphics, which that gives credence to the whole idea that they were around during ancient civilizations, the Mayans and the Aztecs, and the reports there, not to mention the mentions in the Bible. So this kind of just really opens a gigantic fucking intergalactic can of worms.
Imagine if you get yourself to like the spiritual point where you can like. You're tapped into this one consciousness thing, this hill, and then you get stuck with some comic who's always on. Is that a bit? That's what I said. That's what I'm saying like that's the guy in the consciousness.
That would be horrendous.
You're going home, and this guy's like, is that a bit? Was that a?
I really hope that's not the case.
No.
No, I think that here's my other thing is I think that whatever this is used to be something else. Like I think that when I don't like. I was even thinking about like Dan St. Germain, Sean Donnelly. Those are two constructs. They're not real.
Well, that's kind of
Like
fits into what we're
Sean
talking
Donnelly,
about.
that's a name your parent, and then you have these accumulated experience and your
And you have
and your
this
nature,
tangible, physical, material
and then
stuff.
now your identity is based on that. But it's still, I mean, it's still just something kind of we're putting a name on. You know, it's still
Everything in this
Yeah.
world is.
Yeah. So-
and because that's where the basis of language comes from. Look at Arrival, or look at even one of the things they talk about in this in the telepathy tapes and stuff. They talk about the reason why they get so not scapegoated, but so like kicked out of mainstream science with these ideas is because they're like, our whole structure of science is based off the material world. And what they're saying is you can have magnetic waves and you already have brain waves in other respects. Why can't consciousness be its own level of wave?
Well,
and also, remember I told you about that surviving death program that I saw,
Yeah.
and it made me believe in reincarnation.
Yeah.
And then at the end, it's like these kids were having these identities from like people from the 40 years, 50 years prior. If consciousness is a wave, it's just creeping in for a couple of years. I'm Bobby so-and-so who's in World War
that's
II, and then it's
interesting.
out because you're past the
So in
point that you
that
picked
case,
up my
your body
radio
really
station.
just is a vessel.
Exactly. And then it goes back to the Bob Lazar thing that we talked about, where Bob Lazar saw he talked to them about apparently what the aliens have told the government is that we're containers. And they say, containers for what? Could be consciousness. Containers for. So imagine, it's almost like having a net. We're all nets. And then there's consciousness everywhere. And then you're catching one little piece of consciousness, and then because of how our world is set up, and this is very heady, I have nothing to back this up. It follows this physical narrative, and then this physical part dies off, and then the consciousness, if it's done the right way, maybe if it's kept up healthy, it goes back into the consciousness bank. That's what it seems like to me. There's a consciousness bank. You're picking off a little piece of it. You might be getting little snippets of it other places, sixth sense, reincarnation, stuff like that. But then when your physical part goes away, then that's why it might.
But still, we're not doing in this conversation is then explaining. Well, how does this then translate to a physical craft? Which is a whole different,
because
so that that gives you the well, maybe they are corporal because
the
there
beings
is something
themselves?
physical. We're seeing something physical. I mean, unless you really think that that's a projection in itself.
Well, that's
that's
one of the guesses. Is that
but my thing is
we've
we've all seen that TikTok thing, and all looks the same to us.
Right. So here you go. So it's like at that point you can. This thing, whatever this thing is, it's purposeful, and it's manifesting these things to. That's what I don't get, because you're right, that Tic Tac thing or that egg thing that guy saw those beings on. It's like, why are they having the beings go on? And if they're robots, and the being and the craft itself is consciousness, why not just send the craft? Why does it have to be with the beings?
That's and I think that. Too that
unless real quick just before I forget it, unless that's just another way that they're they're interdimensional, and that's just the way that biology happened, and that like we have ours, they have theirs.
Yeah, that's also very possible. We haven't even touched upon like they are attracted to we've mentioned this on their podcast, but nuclear silos, nuclear weapons facilities, nuclear energy plants. That's something, and as we all know, that's such an existential threat to life on planet. It for me, that can't just be happenstance. There has to be a reason for that.
And then on top of it, it seems like it's because radioactive power is these things. It translates to radioactive in our world. So like another thing about Jake Barber we didn't bring up is that he had multitudes of health effects from this. He talked about his skin lopping off like a really bad sunburn, like it was just being peeled off, right? And then he had it was like acute alopecia, where every hair on his body was gone, whatever it is, right? So it's like that could be radioactive. They didn't test him for radiation poisoning, but if that's happening to him, like it's radiation poisoning.
Yeah.
And then you have them showing up at silos. It's because it's showing up on their tests. It's showing up on their instruments. They're going, well, this is just like us. You're almost matching the same amount of power we do for these craft.
Yeah.
So obviously it's coming from this level of power that we can't really conceive of. If it's, I don't know how. That part I don't get, because I don't know the source. But as far as this stuff goes, like the thing that he experienced, and he has the physical reaction, it's like, so maybe it's because because even if you're in, this is all just accidental, you're in contact with one of these beings, the amount of power they give off in our world just recreates a radioactive nuclear fucking reaction by accident because you're in you're not supposed to be in that close to these objects.
I think
or
that's
these
just
beings.
the problem, you know, with even like it's like to talk about this stuff, you kind of have to talk about it like me and Sean are talking about it, where you have to like be open to being wrong about everything.
Yes,
and that is so hard for our society, especially American society. You know, like all of our influencers based on I know this and I know this and somebody getting elected. I mean, we'll go to our president. I have all the answers. This, you know, like we are a fake it till you make it society. So having a conversation where you're going, well, maybe everything is wrong. I don't think that that's really part of the fabric of the American DNA.
No, it's not, and you're right. And but I will say that, but even. This is another thing that can help you believe these interviews, this Grush and Elizondo and Barber, is that when they are asked the hard question of like, are these things extraterrestrial? Because ATIP, which is the group that was formed in, to study these, right? And people think it might not disinformation, but they're there just as like a red herring. The group has come out with the statements. We have now found any evidence of extraterrestrial beings in our environment, whatever it is. And what they're saying is it's semantics because they're using the words extraterrestrial.
Right.
What is actually happening is none of them know where these things come from. So that's how they get away with saying
They have not seen these things come from outer space.
Exactly.
But they're seeing them appear. It's a loophole.
It's a loophole. So what ends up happening is that you can say, I haven't seen any ETs because I don't know where it comes from. It's plausible. They call that plausible deniability. It's like you can say, the thing we saw, we don't know the source, so I can say we haven't seen any of this. And then people go, then it was all bullshit.
But the things that are repeated constantly is the jet propulsion. People
they call them the 5 observables.
The 5 observables. So people have always seen the things that people have seen. A mothership, a triangular mothership. Multiple people have seen that. Multiple people have seen the Tic Tac. Multiple people have seen the Greys. We know the gray aliens with the big fucking eyes and you know are those actual extraterrestrials, or are they essentially drones? You know, and that they're being sent by the consciousness because they're like, hey, this looks enough like a person that they can communicate. This is like more palatable to how we would interact with something. But what I'm trying to say is like the things that I'm mentioning are mentioned constantly. Those are those couple
over and
things
over again.
constantly, and it's not like it's like it's not like somebody's like, and then there's one that looks like an elephant with gill. Like it's like no, they're saying like the stuff that I'm hearing from all these people is repeat shit. It's all crazy shit, but it's repeat shit.
And besides the Greys, they have the thing called the Nordics, which Brian was talking to us about. That's another one that comes up and again. And like they have multiple encounters with these things. So it's like, so there you go. So if you kind of
and then there
together,
may be some evidence that that's connected to sleep paralysis demons.
Right. And if you blend together the idea of this whole theory of this ever knowing consciousness that goes on, and like we were talking about, plus the interdimensions. So whoever's in the 5th dimension is kind of like not I want to say a slave to, but is privy or is a client of the same consciousness, and that's why they're showing up as beings, because there's also biologics that are able to creep over because they've been around for 2 million more years, whatever it is. You know what I'm saying? Like, hey, they were able to kind of manipulate they've realized what this physics is, and they've been like, hey, we can jump over and jump back, and that's our neighbor.
Yeah, that's also very believable.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not very unbelievable, but it's unbelievably believable.
Yeah. So at the end of the day, it's like I'm with you. Like it made me more hopeful than I was. I'm not a religious person.
If this podcast changed to a UFO, we should call it Unbelievably Believable. That was pretty good.
Unbelievably Believable?
That's a pretty good podcast.
I like that. Unbelievably Believable.
Fortunately, guys, we fucking already made a Burbs Bros sign. I made this for $300.
Just marker it and just put Unbelievably Believable on the thing. It's made me more hopeful that there is something that's after you die. Because I think I was way more. There was a time where I thought
it was nothing. I really did think it was nothing.
Yes, same here.
I mean, when I was a little kid, I believed in heaven and hell, and then I just kind of believed in heaven, and I believed in nothing, and now I believe that this thing is. But I think you're right that there could be barriers. Like there's certain people, you know, that won't be able to go because of their, you know, lust for greed or their anger. I don't know, but then again, what I'm doing right now, I'm ascribing human morality to this thing.
Right.
And that's not, you can't really talk about this in terms of that.
But if you believe Jake Barber, it came from a benevolent place. It has a feeling of a human feeling that what we construed as that, right?
And I think people would have a real hard time believing, that the consciousness of like Princess Diana and Osama bin Laden are connected,
Right.
And that would be a huge pill for people to swallow.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think what it boils down to is that I think the radio station analogy makes the most sense to me. So I think if you're not open to this thing, it also, man, if you really put this in the world of human-based things. So if you put it when it comes to like we talked about before, but the Bible and Ezekiel's will, but then you also look. There's stories. I was talking to a friend of mine. He was like, "Do you know in the Bible the story about a God with Moses in the desert?" He's like, "It was a physical." He's in the story. It's a physical pillar of fire, and I never knew that. I just never read the Bible enough to know that it's a physical object that's talking to Moses in the desert.
Yeah,
I'm like, first off, you can put our science-wise, you can make that a version of something that we're talking about, where it's like they saw a light and then whatever it was. But also, what you're realizing is like. People use the phrase enlightened. It's like we're basically just beating around the bush saying that same exact thing. Like, hey, if you get on the radio station of what this thing is, you die, your consciousness realizes, oh my God, this actually is for real. If you don't, you don't. And then that's why people in religion are like, you either get saved, or you get enlightened, or you don't, and that's it. And that's what hell is for a lot of these people. So it's like they have their human terms for what we're talking about. You know what I'm saying? Like we've relegated it to our culture to a lot of different ways, and that's why you have all the beefs over it.
But it's interesting. Like the guy who wrote Eminent. He thinks that it could be a recon mission. He thinks it's
right.
Could be much more dark and. But to me, that is the most unbelievable theory out of all of them, and I'll tell you why. Because with the technology they've displayed already, if they wanted to farm us, they could have done it already.
Yeah,
that would be the like. I just don't. I don't know. I mean, maybe it just doesn't feel that to me as like. I just feel like, well, then wouldn't they have already? It seems like they could have beaten us 1,000 years ago. Why wouldn't they take us out then either? Like it doesn't make any sense.
And but you're also putting it on our time clock. So if it's like time is a circle thing from arrival. You don't know when it's coming because they're not on our clock. The flip side of that is that they also. What more believable to me in that world, that line of thinking, like Elizondo has, is the ant farm situation. We're an experiment, and they've been observing the experiment.
I think that's probably the most likely.
Yeah.
But I'm hopeful that it's something else. That there's a higher consciousness that we can all. Now that we're getting reaching the end of this podcast, I would say that the two most likely options for us would be either a higher consciousness that everyone's connected to, or there are actually interdimensional or maybe even extraterrestrial beings that are basically just studying us in an experiment. Both of those seem like the most likely. I think that it can be the mix of the two, where it's like, if there is other beings, even if they're interdimensional, we're both on the same. Like, say you flip over to the fifth dimension and they're on their year is 412 days. You know what I'm saying? It's like because time is an element in their situation too, but they've realized how to kind of poke the hole through the other side here to show up for a couple of minutes and then go back, or to crash a craft or whatever it is, or So to end what we started with, so the one thing we didn't get to was, which kind of fits into what we're saying now, but a little bit. Jake Barber, watch the interview. One aspect of it he talks about is people with their consciousness able to communicate with these craft and invite them to land, which is the most, to get your head around that's when you really have to sign yourself over to it. But I'm like, consider the source. Consider the source, and then what he's saying, and then he's seen it firsthand. He's not saying like, "Hey, somebody told me this happened once." Yeah, he's seen it firsthand. So what it becomes is a manipulation of space time. What it becomes is that there's something else to consciousness than just, "Hey, it shuts off the minute we're gone." It lives on in some other form. The energy's got to go somewhere.
That's what it is.
100%.
But guys, thank you.
So yeah, we're actually at the end of our next guest was stuck in the elevator. I
Oh,
just
really?
found
Oh,
out. Yeah.
shoot. Oh, no.
But she'll get out. Check out my special Dance Fetty Dance on 2 memes. We're gonna have a Patreon. It's gonna be coming in April, May. We've already recorded a bunch of content for it. We have some other ideas. We'll let you know more about it. And please tell people about the podcast.
And please tell us what you think about the UFO stuff because we love it and we want to talk about it more. Guys,
do you like the dumb stories or the UFO stuff? Let us know.
Follow at Burbs Bros. Guys, YouTube. Okay. Subscribe to the YouTube and tell your friends, guys. Tell your friends about the podcast. It's really important. Thank you guys so much. Thanks to Pat. We'll see you next week.